Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with Rogan Smith, who we wish to offer our sympathies to. She's having a hard time because of her... What's your dog's name?
Tinkerbell.
Tinkerbell. I'm going to reserve all comments. But,
I didn't give her that name.
Who gave her the name?
My mommy gave her that name. I was away at college, and she was in love
Was
with
it your dog
Paris.
then, or she found the
Let me
dog?
tell you something. This dog, her friend had a bunch of dogs and
Puppies.
Yeah, puppies, and she took one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, a lady took one,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess the dog had worms at the time, and she wasn't feeling that, so she returned to owner, and my mother
Yeah.
took the dog,
Okay.
and so I was away at college, and after that, when you come back home and you're working, all of a sudden you'd be like, "This your dog."
That's what your mother said?
Yeah,
Oh,
like,
this your
that's
dog?
this your dog.
Okay.
So
Take
he
care.
became my dog.
And this is what we would call a domesticized dog?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. No problem.
Yes.
And the dog lived internally?
Yes.
Indoors?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Say internally. I've
So
never
he
heard
was
it
what you call,
referred
he
to
didn't have
as
a
that.
thug life.
She didn't know. There's a girl.
It's
She
a
didn't know
girl.
anything about that thug life.
Okay.
She was
When she
accustomed
see
to
a
air
shell, when she see a
conditioned.
55 gallon, she didn't freak out?
She
She was okay with the 55 gallon.
was okay with the 55 gallon. She just wasn't accustomed to the
Yeah.
thug life.
Yeah. So she had like food in a bowl.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Like
She was well taken care of.
what was the brand? I want to get into Tinkerbell's life. What was the brand of food? Was it Purina? Or was it Chow?
Purina. I mean,
Purina, okay.
what's the other one?
Dr. Ballard's?
No.
That's to
Purina.
show you how long ago it is since I had a dog.
Alpo.
Alpo.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
They make
She had
such
her
a...
favorites and stuff
Do you
like
watch
that.
the Westminster Dog Show?
I don't.
You don't?
I have zero interest in it.
I watch that, That's some
You
freaky
told me.
dogs there.
Mm.
But you know what? You should watch it though. Why?
I'm not interested in it.
Well, you're a dog lover, or you're just a Tinkerbell lover.
I'm a dog lover. I'm
Okay.
an animal lover. I don't have any interest in that show.
That's
Seeing the dogs just run around and.
Well, not running around, just looking at the different species, the different breeds.
I need to watch that.
Okay. Well, I always, because I always, you ever see that, Ken? Yeah, Ken and I watch it.
Can't say you've seen it. You just say
Ken,
watch it.
do you watch it? Do you watch it?
I've seen it.
See, listen, I know she's in grief.
He
There's
said,
no need
"I've
to take
seen
her
it."
side.
He said, "I've seen
He's
it."
doing it. He's only doing it out of sympathy. Okay. All right. Y'all getting like Trump now. Should versus must.
He is Trump.
Yeah. Okay. But okay. And anything else we need to know about Tinkerbell? Did Tinkerbell have any children? Any offspring?
No, I had that taken care of at a young age.
So she never had a sample.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
A sample? What do you mean? Of sex?
That's exactly what I mean, Rogan. You didn't.
Yes, she had-
most
she
people
had a
once they say a sample,
Well, I
once
don't-
I said, "Did
I
she
don't
have
know
any
what you mean.
kids?" You said no. Then I said, "Did she have a sample?" Most people make that link up.
She's been sexually active. Yes.
Okay. Oh, she has.
Yes.
Hmm. Okay.
Because when she first started in Heat,
Uh huh.
dogs I'd never seen in my life showed
pop
up
up,
on my
boy.
doorstep. I didn't know the neighborhood had so many dogs.
You know.
And they just show up out of nowhere.
Do you think? And I'm going to just hop away from the
Mm-hmm.
dog thing now. That doesn't happen in humankind, does it?
Yes, it does.
Heat. You think that happens?
It happens.
I don't think so.
It happens every month.
Yeah, but I don't think brothers pile up like that.
You
I
know,
don't think-
scientifically
I
they're
can't.
attracted. You release certain what do you call it?
And hormones or. I was gonna say,
Endomorphins or something
yeah,
like that.
something, yeah.
You release certain
I
stuff.
think,
then-
what's interesting, and I'm just going to say this, I mean, it's fairly graphic. I think brothers kind of scatter.
During that time?
Yeah, I think it's the
I don't
opposite.
think that's everybody.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, I don't think we have that innate sense to go like,
No, you don't
and then
smell
as
that.
we, and then we leave from home
you
and
smell-
go by Village
Oh,
Road.
yeah, if you see something you like, you may not be you're smelling something, but
Yeah.
you see something you like, you
Yeah, but
leaving from Adelaide to
we're
come
not-
out east.
But we're not. That's if you see the person, you recognize the person. It doesn't have to be any particular time you go. I don't
You only
think
need to
like
see her once.
you reach somewhere, right? And take Tina to do it's there.
Oh yeah.
Because
Crowding around
that'll
the girls.
cause gunplay. So yeah, no, it's amazing how that works in nature, and you have to fend off the other chaps and all that sort of thing, and bucking horns and all that kind of thing. But anyway, so I'm sad to hear that your dog is not well, and you've made the decision that you're going to have to take him out of his pain.
Her.
Her.
Yeah.
Why are all animals hymns? Her.
Yeah,
Out
she
of her
has
pain.
bone cancer,
Oh Lord.
and it's incredibly painful.
Yeah.
Incredibly painful. And the thing is, like doctor says, animals don't express pain the way that we do.
Yeah. They
You
just
know, like how
kind of lay
about
down.
winds or whatever, they'll keep their
Yeah.
heads low or they'll
Mhm.
pant a lot. And
Mhm.
I've noticed that. And like as much as I love her and I love her to death, I wouldn't want to see her
Yeah.
suffer just to keep her here from me. You know?
Well, in the wild, it's even more basic. When an animal is sick, they just kind of the herd or the pack leaves them alone. To fend for themselves. They ain't got no time to you checking for no sickliness. That's what they call the survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Keeps the species strong.
Yeah.
But yes, so our condolences to you, and it is what it is, I suppose. The circle of life, as I say.
I guess
Are you
that's
going to
how
get
it
another DOG?
No, not for a long time. I know I love animals a lot, and I've had pets from I was young. I mean, from I was a little
Yeah,
girl.
but you don't count fish.
No, I've never had fish. I've always had dogs, cats, rabbits.
Parakeets?
No,
Okay.
they make too much noise. Yeah, but I don't think that's. I actually find it like offensive when someone says, "Oh, you could get another dog." Like not you. I'm just
Well,
saying
it'd be
like
like saying you could get
immediately.
another child. I mean,
It's
it's
just
the same
yeah.
thing.
It's like
Yeah.
you gotta take your time.
Yeah, it's
to
emotional.
grieve
It's
that.
it's an emotional attachment. Like, I mean, look, people get emotionally attached to clothes for crying out loud. So,
Oh yeah, don't
so
step on someone.
or just like they don't want to throw something away.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously an animal that is responding to you that gives you love.
Oh yeah, lots of
Yeah,
love.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So again, please
Yeah, man,
accept
thank
my.
you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I see you go with the Gullah style today, eh?
With my hair?
Yeah.
This is the.
Gullah.
I just don't care.
Well,
hairstyle
I like,
today.
but I like them kind of styles.
You like big hair?
Well, it just let it
I
flow.
look like a lioness.
I wouldn't
maybe
put
a
it that.
lion.
Lioness
Maybe a
don't.
lion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they don't have
and if you look like a lion, that's a problem. You don't want to be a lion. What are you?
My
a
hair
trans,
is big like the lion.
A trans feline.
You like
What
that?
Okay. Come on, man.
Yeah.
The natural styles.
You like
Natural
that?
styles, yeah. Because
Like,
you know what I don't, what I'm not into.
I was gonna ask you, so if I come in here with a weave, what you could say?
We're gonna ridicule you on the air.
For a weave?
Yeah.
I'm
I'm not
thinking
into
about
it.
switching it up. Not
You
perming
can't
my
get
hair.
no
I'm
weave.
never perming my hair.
Yeah.
But I put on a wig.
You can't do that.
Yeah, man. But
No.
not. But if it looks too wiggy, I ain't fooling with it.
Yeah. Make sure you check that out before you come in here. Okay. Make sure
Why, you
and
just
get some
talk bad to me?
and get some opinions. Don't just check it on your.
I'm gonna know.
Because,
This wiggy.
do you think people who dress in a non-complimentary way get opinions, or they just think they look good, or do people lie to them outright?
I don't lie to them. I'll say I'm surrounded by a very honest bunch of people who will say, "Where you going with this jacked up wig?"
See,
on?"
one of the things, and I'm going to be very graphic, and people
They
are
don't
going to
play.
take offense. By the way, and remind me to come back to talk about people who have been telling us about the show. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, then we're going to talk about the uncomplimentary, clothing. We'll be right back. Rogan Smith, Ed Fields. Rogan Smith, would you tell the audience about our lovely and wonderful sponsors?
I know this feels like Price is Right. The Price is Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very big shout out and thank you to our amazing sponsors. Of course, Roman Meal Bread, Sunshine Insurance, Arawak Homes, John Bull Business Center, Kelly's, Bristol Wines and Spirits, Wendy's, KFC, Burger King, Heineken, Coca-Cola, Superwash, Insurance Management, Subway, and Assure Win. And Sunshine Insurance, of course, 2 locations to serve you, East Shirley Street and, of course, in Carmichael Road behind the walk-up Wendy's, just a few blocks away from road traffic. So,
And
there
we
go.
always got to throw a little shout out to Kelly's, who it's that time of the year, Rogan Smith, back to school. Oh yeah, back to school.
I was in Kelly's yesterday.
Yeah. Head back to school in style with Kelly's House and Home and start the year off right. 20% off on all back to school items. From backpacks, that's really a big thing. When I was in school, we had school bag. Backpack, by the way, that's another story. To really cute lunch bags, pens, crayons, and more. Except on net items from Friday, July 27th through Tuesday, September 4th. Are you ready? Enter to win the Grab All You Can Shop Spree. See, I want to do one of them. All you can grab shopping spree. Plus, that's not all. There are 2 bicycles, 1 fully loaded school basket, and 1 HP laptop up for grabs. Kelly's House and Homes back to school still Friday, July 27th to Tuesday, September 4th. I think when I'm back, those grab, what you call them? Grab what? All you could grab?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have a strategy, man, if I win.
What's that?
No, I'm not going to tell you my strategy.
And not only me, everybody else who's listening.
Yeah. You go for your, like I see these, like food store thing. Head to the meats, man.
The most expensive thing?
Go to the meats.
That's it. But,
you know, get some meats, send it to TP to take care of the meat later.
Meats and cheeses.
Yeah,
and
cheese,
detergent.
Yeah.
I mean, like cleaning items.
Yeah,
that sort of
Let's
stuff.
go to the meats,
But meat spoils so quickly. Anyway,
put it in
unless
the
you get the
freezer.
deep freezer.
Yeah. So also, I just want to go back to the discussion we had about uncomplimentary shapes. And like I told you, I don't want you coming here. You usually you carry yourself well for the most part.
For the most part, I look bad some days.
No. I'm just saying when I say the most part, some days obviously, you just like you're feeling it.
That's
you feel like all right, I just got to get there. But anyway, so I'm just saying, okay, well we all like that. We're all in that mode. But don't come here with no. And the other thing you don't do, and I praise you for this, and I've said it openly. You don't wear a pile of makeup.
Yeah.
That scares me.
I don't like that. That's too much.
Yeah.
I don't have the commitment to do that.
It's a lot of energy. But going back to what people wear, if you have you want to wear something tight, and everyone likes to wear something tight every now, especially women. But if you feel like you're looking like the Michelin Man, you know the Michelin?
I do. So it's like, look here. It's like sausage casing.
Yeah, it's like
and it bulging
it's like
right
a pastry,
here.
It's like So if but your friend should be going, look, man, Michelin, don't go over that. Feel I'm gonna try put you on as a spare. Okay, so no, I mean I'm not trying to be cruel, but I just think that people should wear things that are complimentary to them. Everyone's beautiful, but I'm not gonna try to wear like a tight, what you call it?
Them tight skinny jeans.
Well, I wouldn't even talk about it. I talk about them tank top. Like
where
a size X,
like
a size large. Shut up, man. People say, yeah, come on, man.
I look like a bra.
Yeah, people say, come on. Like,
you sound like Wendell Jones when you did that just now.
What you trying to prove? What you trying to do?
I see that often though, especially with the ladies. I'd be like, I will buy clothes that's bigger than I am just to be comfortable, and so. But people they get caught up on size, and so they wear these smaller stuff.
Is it comfortable?
No.
When you're tied up like that.
But some people used to that though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think being tied up is comfortable, but anyway.
Yeah.
But our guest this afternoon, by the way, is this has no correlation to being tied up. Our guest this afternoon.
You should have waited for this.
Let me talk about something. Blah, blah. Okay, our guest this afternoon. Our guest this afternoon. I tell you what we'll do as a segue. Roseanne, I've been running across more and more people. First of all, I have a little thing. Yesterday, I went down to an establishment, and I had to tour a bunch of people, and they were from Korea.
You had to take them on a tour?
To an establishment, right?
Excuse me.
And, there's some, investor-type people. And these people are from Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that a rumor reached back, we hear some Chinese people buy out Atlantis?
What?
Yeah, that's how they go. And then it becomes a swirl.
What?
They're not even Chinese. They're Korean, number one.
That's that.
Okay. But just that association, Ed, from Atlantis.
Oh, my God.
Asians.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They must be buy them out.
Mm-hmm.
That's must be his new bosses. So it's just, But, no, what I was going to talk about was the fact that I'm getting so many people now, Rogan Smith, coming up to me from all walks of life, whether it's Family Guardian. I want to say a shout out to Rashad Delancey. He said, man, you all need to put that show on more, man.
What?
Yeah, he said, it's only 2 days. I said, listen, I thought about this the other day. The U.S. people, the U.S. talk show hosts and shows, they got it easy, Because they got Trump.
Oh, so they have a lot of fodder.
They don't have to worry about what they can talk about that day.
Yeah, but that gets played out.
They don't
I
care.
tell you, that's why I can't stand watching U.S. media right now.
Yeah, but they don't care.
That gets played out, though.
They got people, they got all kind of lawyers and experts, and all they talk about is your boy say it must.
It's like Trump TV, Trump radio. every single day.
They don't have to. You and I
would
work
get
hard to
bored.
find
Let me tell you
quality
something.
guests, and our guests are quality guests, and that's why I want to segue into our guest this afternoon, Rogan.
You went through all that to bring it into
Yeah.
the segue. Boy, you long-winded.
I want to separate the tight up from our quality guests. Now you cause me to say tight up again. Okay. But no, our guest this afternoon is the one, the only, really. So Arthur, folks, hard to believe. He's going to tell me his age. I think it's one of these crazy ages that if you look at him, it's no way that's viable. But anyway,
I think he looks really great.
Yeah. He just had a birthday the other day, so I don't want to say the wrong age. But he'll tell us, I'm sure. But Sir Arthur Folkes, former Governor General, former journalist, one of the founders and the forefathers, I think, of the country, really. And so we're going to talk about Emancipation Day, Independence. I wanted to get him on for Independence, but they're kind of one and the other when you think about it. Independence. Where have we come from then? And start this conversation that you were interested in talking about, and that is, the element of race. Is it race? Is it tribalism? Is it classism? There's a lot of sociological stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
We were talking the other day. I was talking with some of my colleagues about our expectation of service, for instance. And when you think about this, we have this dynamic where we have not what we would call the best public education system.
Right.
We have people who are in the educated field, who shirk, for instance, service-related occupations, like in the hotel. Vincent Vanderpool Wallace once told me that out of his graduating class at Government High, he was the only one who was in the hospitality industry.
Wow.
Okay? Because it's looked like you wake in a hotel, because we thought of them as only servants. And, So now we take kids who are from the inner city. We don't have what I call the minor league of working, right? In the States, if you're in high school, man, after school, you working. Weekends, you working. Summer, you working. Okay?
But we have that to an extent, though.
Very little. I can tell you in my organization, tiny bit.
I tell you, I always point to the children who, I can't.
The bag boys, the gas station guys.
And the pump attendants and
that's a small segment.
The newspaper boy. And now I see them getting a little older now.
Yeah.
But
that's compared to what used to be newspaper boys, they were all over the place. You don't see them now.
You don't see them as much.
No, because people don't, they get in delivery, they watch it on TV.
I see the kids, though, on the street selling, especially summertime, the ganaps and the cookies and stuff.
And by the way, they will be the kids who will be the most industrious later on.
I believe that entirely.
And the reason is they are used to working.
And they were used to rejection as well.
Right.
It builds their character.
And they're used to how to deal with people. You take a kid from, say, and I'm just giving a generalized scenario, who is from an inner city environment where their exchange with people is very limited. Okay, so and when I'm talking about a diversity of people.
Yeah.
So they see white people, they see Asian people, they see people of means, etc., but they don't interact with them.
Right.
And then you take that child, 18 years old, who's never really worked, and you put him
in the workforce
on the front line
That's a problem.
of a service industry, and for 8 hours. So he ain't even used to working 8 hours.
That's a problem.
And then you say, I need you to be able to handle guests, customers. I need you to be engaged. Well, let's face it. Let's be honest. A lot of people who are in that environment may not even have the highest of educational standards, but there's a level of intimidation, right? So when you now all of a sudden there's a black kid dealing with a white foreign person from some aggressive environments like New York, and these people have complaints. Okay, they just go like, "Hi, how you doing?" No, they go, "What's happening here?"
Right.
Now, there's two ways to react to that. Like, let me tell you about yourself, but let me tell you about yourself, get you fired. So you don't go that road. So you go with the blank.
That's frustrating for the guest as
well. The guest is like, why is this person just staring at me? Why is it? Because that's their way of coping with the situation.
I think, too, it is that, and I absolutely agree, but I also believe that sometimes it's poor placement and it's an HR problem because if you are dealing with someone who is not a social butterfly, I think you need to explore. If you're working in a hotel area, maybe you need to work behind the scenes more. Maybe you have great ability in that area rather than being like client facing. Dealing with guests. It's a placement issue.
It is placement, but it's also the pool.
It's so limited.
Right. So I can guarantee you, and I'm sure you've had to deal with this, that if you are hiring someone for a specific role, that people who are employers will tell you how many people they have to go through
to get a
to
quality
find that person. Now, I'm not going to get into disparaging people from working and finding jobs, etc. But the reality is, you're absolutely right. The skill set must meet the personality, and unfortunately, that's sometimes extremely difficult.
Let me do something. When I was away in school in Georgia, I worked part-time to Nordstrom's department store, okay?
Right.
And I remember for a simple job as just being on the floor selling clothes, I underwent so many, it was like different layers of
college, right?
I was in college,
Right.
different layers of interviews.
Right.
And I remember they wanted to put me in one area and they said, no, she has a great smile and she's outgoing. We can put her over here. Let's put this person over here. And it's like watching this happen.
I'd never back in the warehouse.
I'd never seen this happen before because I'd worked in NASA. I was like, these people actually, they're strategic in where they place their people.
Look, I don't want to sound like I'm discriminating against people, right? But just look at how people get placed to be on TV. It's all about your pool, right? You can't have people. Let's just be graphic. Let's be candid. It's not a big deal. You can't have people on TV who don't have a grasp of grammar and English. It's not a thing. For the news.
Yeah,
if you want to do Sawyer Boy, fine, no problem. By the way, I watched Sawyer Boy yesterday.
I love Sawyer Boy.
I watched Sawyer Boy last night. You have a salty sausage thing.
Yes, I love that.
You saw that?
You see when they put
See,
the
now
girl?
what you gotta do, babe? You gotta flip the bag. You flip that bag and make sure this how the bag needs to look when it's finished.
That is so funny.
You see how you cut it? You cut it. So you use that. So when you want to share, don't even get it because they was licking a lot of fingers and sharing the salty. I would never do that.
When the little girl going to put her hand in the bag, he said, "Get your hand on my bag."
But no, when he was with his brother, when he showed up, because he slapped him.
That's
so
funny.
Because you get the string, because I've done that.
And pull out
and you pull that strut. You see how it's supposed to look? Okay. But no,
funny.
on that's the entertainment
Right.
thing. But when you are presenting the news, when you're presenting information to people, the reality is you need to be speaking the King's English or the Queen's English, whoever's in at the time, and communicating in that way. Okay. We do it. We go back and forth in dialect, etc. That's okay. But you know what? We're doing it for a purpose. Okay, there's an entertainment value here. There's also but if I told a bunch of high school students once who I went to for a graduation thing, I don't think anyone's going to ever have me back to anything. The speech only lasted 5 minutes, not even that much. I told them, I said 3 things. 1, learn how to speak proper English, because if I have to select someone for a job, and 2 people come before me, one who go like, yeah, well, I for that I want to run, and the other one who goes, no, sir, I think I would be suited to another position.
Ding, ding, ding.
Okay.
It's
right?
a no-brainer.
It's just like, yeah. And also how you present yourself. If you come to job and you're slouching, you're wearing a singlet. What's the sound? What's the sound? Right. If you come to me in a nice shirt, well presented, sitting up straight, giving me eye contact.
Ding, ding, ding.
Exactly.
It's very simple.
It's not. And by the way,
and no
the person who's sitting, what's that?
No fingerlings.
No. Yeah, don't have that piece. That piece coming
Look
out
like
where you cut every part except that. Okay. Look like by the way, the person who's presented themselves well could be a complete gruff, whatever. But you give. That's all I'm judging you by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But at least fool me until you get through the door.
Fool me, man. Fool
You know
me.
what I'm saying?
Okay, because I could always fire after probation.
It ain't working out.
Okay, but don't.
days.
This is important stuff. This is why we are having so many problems, because we're not. Listen, I can't imagine By the way, when you had to apply for a government job, at least in certain levels, you had to have at least, I think it was 5 GCEs. Okay, that's what was the qualification.
Oh,
period.
yeah?
And 2 had to be, 1 had to be math, 1 had to be English. Okay, so we've removed standards, and you know what? Let's not blame the people who are not meeting the standards. If a standard is removed, why do I need to meet it? Okay, if you're just letting anyone in, well, I just government,
You know, I want to say something.
You may.
Today I was at University of the Bahamas because they had a
UB?
UB. They had a robotics camp for girls that it teaches girls, it's like STEM, technology,
Yeah.
how to assemble like Lego robots. And I saw a lovely mix of young girls from private schools and public schools working together, assembling these robots.
Right.
Shout out to Stacey Moultrie for even putting this together.
Right.
Fantastic program. And that's what we need. You're talking about education.
Right.
And exposure, exposing these young girls to environments like this where they can learn about technology. You know what I mean? Just fantastic.
Well, education should, listen, we talk about all of our problems, and it gets mixed in a cacophony of interests, and, you have an interest of this, and someone may be interested in crime, and another one. But you know what it all boils down to? It all boils down to education. And I think Sir Arthur will speak to this, right? If we had just put all of our effort in 1967, and we started to. That's what I'm a product of. I'm a product of being able to get a scholarship to go to Queen's College.
I remember you
Okay?
told me.
But if we had put all of our major effort into education, everything else would have worked out for itself, because you would have had a prepared population for the changes, to be able to think, to be able to present themselves in the sciences, in the humanities, in a whole range of things. But I fear that we lost track and we focused on the flat screens.
Yeah, it's not too late to bounce back.
We'll be back. Our guest is Sir Arthur, folks. We'll be back in a minute. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ed Fields here along with Rogan Smith. I have no idea where she is, although I do have an idea probably. And Sir Arthur, folks, is our guest this afternoon. And once again, Sir Arthur, it's always a pleasure having you. And it just does us. It's a privilege for us for you to even consent to come. And I was in complete error when I said that Sir Arthur was in his 80s, and I was only off by a decade, or as we say, decades, plural. Okay. But thank you for coming.
My great pleasure.
Yeah. Listen, it is. We tried first to get you for Emancipation Day. Independence Day. And of course now Emancipation Day is on Monday. And I think they're kind of one and the same in the sense that where have we come? It's an old question. Obviously, Emancipation Day predates independence by almost a century, I suppose. First of all, let's deal with Emancipation Day. I think is it a relevant holiday?
Oh, absolutely.
No, you know why I'm asking that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not asking that. I don't think it's certainly something that is not worth commemorating. But do we feel the relevance? Do Bahamians?
Well, that's
that's
another question.
Yeah.
That's another question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to be, and I'm always happy to discuss this question because there's a great reluctance on the part of some people to talk about these things.
Yes.
Right.
And holidays like Emancipation, Majority Rule,
Yes.
these are occasions for us to talk about these things in a sensible, intelligent way,
Right.
so we can understand. When after Mandela took over, they had their Truth and Reconciliation
Right.
process.
Right.
If you've been cultivating demons of a certain kind for 300 years, you don't exorcise them in a
That's
flash of a finger. You have to work at it.
And you certainly don't exercise them by not
By
pretending
not
it didn't
talking,
exist.
but it didn't exist, exactly.
Right.
And there's a reluctance here on the part of, not just here, in other parts, there's a reluctance to talk about. People find it uncomfortable.
Yes.
Right.
But it's something you need to talk about. And it's a race thing, but emancipation should be celebrated by all people, just like majority rule. It should be celebrated by blacks and whites because humanity took a great turn for the better.
That's right.
And all people of goodwill. I don't know if you realize this, but I'm sure you do. This is what made Derwood Knowles so great, Derwood Knowles understood that. And he was one of the few leading white Bahamians who was not afraid to talk about this and to face the issue.
Right.
And even went so far as to apologize, even though he had nothing to do with it. Right? And the result of it was that people love him.
Right. Embrace
Black
him.
people love him, and they embrace him.
Well, you saw the relationship between him and Obie Pinley. Were you aware of that relationship?
No, I wasn't.
It's phenomenal. I'll knowing Obie, he wouldn't want me to say much more about it, but they had a phenomenal relationship after they got to know each other.
Yes.
In fact, I don't know if you remember, in the last election, Obie escorted Sir Derwood to vote.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Sir Derwood asked him to take him to vote. And they're on different sides of the coin, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, well, exactly.
But why do you think white people are uncomfortable with it? I mean, considering that people today didn't have anything to do with slavery.
I think people misunderstand that because you want to talk about it, it's some sort of reflection on you.
Right.
It's not a reflection on you, but it happened and you have to face it.
Right.
And let's face it, blacks were seriously disadvantaged for more than 300 years for the whole period from the 15th to the 19th century of actual slavery.
Right.
And then
economically,
in all sorts of ways,
and socially.
I don't know if you read this book. There's an interesting book by a man named Black Morn.
No.
Slavery by Another Name. And he recounts what happened in America.
Right.
After slavery.
Well, especially after Reconstruction.
After Reconstruction.
Right.
And so, and let me repeat, these demons just don't go away by themselves.
But so Arthur, I have a theory, and I don't know if it's valid or not, but it would be interesting to hear your perspective on it. I think it's because that we don't talk about it is because of how history continues to portray the process. Okay? So, for instance, I watched a movie that probably got me thinking this way, called Lincoln. And in that movie, what I realized was that in the House of Representatives, where they passed that law for the 13th Amendment, that in that house were no black people. So in order for them to get to pass that law, it had to be passed by all white people.
Exactly.
Okay? In fact, we talked about this before when we talked about the referendum on women's rights, that never in the history of mankind, we did the research, has any minority been given rights by going to the majority. It's just not going to happen. So a minority of good men, of true representatives, have to make these hard decisions. We see where in the House of Assembly on 2 occasions, the House of Assembly unanimously voted for the rights for women.
Right.
But when we went to the majority, whole other story. So how did we lose the narrative? Because this is where I think the difficulty comes in. How did we lose the narrative that white and black people were involved in the emancipation? Because it seems, from a historical perspective, the story that is told is that only blacks dealt with the emancipation issue, right? You don't hear about abolitionists. You hear about Martin Luther King and all that, but you don't hear about abolitionists. Does that lend to it, you think?
It does. And again, that is, you're absolutely right. That is why, again, it is so important to know the history.
Right.
Blacks could not have freed themselves.
No.
Right.
They agitated, they rebelled.
Right.
Sometimes they were cruelly put down. But it took other people of goodwill. The same thing with the abolition of slavery in the Commonwealth, in the Empire.
Right.
The
Wilberforces, those
people. These were great men.
Exactly.
And they were white.
But you don't hear of that. See, and this is why I get goosebumps when you talking about it. Rogan Smith actually brought this subject to me to talk about it on having a series of discussions on this. You don't hear about these people,
Right.
so it seems extremely polarized. Blacks for emancipation, whites were not for emancipation. Blacks were for this, whites for civil rights, whites were, and that is not the case.
It is men and women of goodwill.
Right.
But unfortunately, the whole system is based on race, and the majority were brainwashed into believing a certain thing. When the Europeans, before the Europeans went to Africa, there were African societies and civilizations.
Without slavery.
Long before the Europeans got to that level.
Yeah.
When the Europeans were in the Dark Ages, we had a university at Timbuktu. We had Zimbabwe. We had the Kingdom of Mali. You remember the story of the King of Mali who went on a trek from Mali to Mecca with a wonderful caravan with all sorts of riches and wonderful things. And when he got there, they were amazed.
I know. I saw something by this fellow Gates from the
Lewis Gates,
was
yes.
it Harvard or one of the schools,
yes.
who showed about the ancient civilizations of Africa.
Yes.
It was astounding.
It is.
And it's like, because we're Eurocentric, we don't talk about
But the point is, though, you see, the point is that some African society, the tragedy of slavery is not only what happened to the slaves who were brought to the New World. The tragedy of it is that African society was destroyed in Africa
That's right.
Mhm.
Yes.
through slavery
Yes.
and through brutalization and genocide. In Belgium alone, in the Belgian Congo
right?
alone,
Terrible.
King Leopold.
Mhm.
They
He was one of the
came. They
most
came
brutal.
late to the colonial
Right,
game,
right.
and between some estimates go as high as 12 million people were slaughtered in the Congo. You know what that does to a people? The society is destroyed.
Destroyed.
In
history is
later
destroyed.
years, in the early part of the last century, Mussolini killed over 2 million Ethiopians. And then you wonder why these countries are the way they
And
are.
all of their
Yeah.
monuments, all
They've
their
been-
cities, and the remnants of their cities were
And-
destroyed.
Culture.
And the memory of them, and this is where the big deception came in. The people who wanted to do these things, who wanted to exploit African treasure
Mhm.
in the ground, and also African treasure in the form of human beings,
Mhm.
they had to tell their people back home a false narrative.
Right.
So these people were savages. They
Yes.
were less than human.
Yes.
They had to justify
They had to dehumanize.
why they had to
That's
dehumanize.
perfectly stated.
Exactly.
Can I ask a question? I don't want to go too far off the topic, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I had spoken to Fields about is the fact that I wanted to do a type of show where we talked about race relations in this country, because I just feel like it's just something we never discuss because people are just so uncomfortable having that conversation. How would you characterize the race relations in the Bahamas today?
I think we are better than a lot of other countries, but there's still a tentativeness on the part of some people. There's still a holding back and a reluctance to do it. That's why I always use the case of David Knowles, and that is why people loved him so. And he came with the One Bahamas move.
Yes.
That was so absolutely brilliant.
Unifying.
Yes, exactly. And this is what it's all about.
Yes.
Everybody should celebrate Emancipation Day, not just black people. Everybody should celebrate majority rule, not just black people.
But again, you
Because
have
it was good for the country, everybody.
right. You have the quagmire, though, or the dilemma, I should say, of what people's perception of that is. What people's perception of the celebration is. What people's perception of how we got emancipation. One of the great stories that I love to tell, and I think you and I have discussed this before, is when you look at the juxtaposition of Vendu House, which is now known as Pompey Museum, right? And which just only recently renamed the square, Pompey Square. But the juxtaposition of Government House to Pompey Museum, right? It's almost directly opposite up George Street, okay? And almost accidentally, okay, this juxtaposition occurred when Pompey, the slave who escaped from Exuma, came to Nassau after hiding in the bushes for weeks I find these feats all just completely remarkable. Hiding in the bush for 5 weeks and then taking the boat and getting to Nassau, just remarkable stuff. And then appealing to the then royal governor that the transaction that Roll, this is the slave master in Exuma, had undertaken to separate the family and sell them off to Cat Island and different places, I think it was. I can't be correct on that, maybe. That transaction was overturned by the royal governor as unjust. I don't know what happened subsequent to that, but we don't hear that part, right? How many people you think know that? I think his name was Lord Smythe or Smith. How many people know that, Sir Arthur?
Yeah. I wonder how many people know the story of Pompey.
Yeah, let's start with that.
So that's why I say I'm always glad to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Because it's a process of education.
Yes.
You know.
So it has to start in our schools then. It has to obviously start. That's where and that's the other kind of diminishing of our past that has happened, right? Mm-hmm. You and I'm certainly sure that you did. I grew up learning about Bonnie St. Charlie or whatever. Mm-hmm. I didn't grow up learning about Pompey and Lord Smith.
Exactly.
Okay.
My generation was worse.
And I don't know, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how much better it is today in terms of what we learn. I don't know the curriculum, so I'm just saying out of ignorance.
I think things have improved.
Uh-huh.
I think we are learning a bit more about our history and about our geography as well. Mm-hmm. But you're right. When I was going to school, we were taught nothing about ourselves.
Yeah.
You know,
I think we had some vague reference to the kinds.
Families and what king was from,
right?
Reigned at what time and who fought whom. And
I could name all the dates.
Coles from Newcastle.
The Magna Carta, the this and the that thing. But you don't know about we're going to take a break, and we'll be back. Our guest, our very special guest this afternoon, is Sir Arthur, folks. We'll talk more about emancipation. We'll talk about independence, and we'll talk about, what are the next steps? How do we just get out of this dilemma that we're in? We'll be right back. Our guest this afternoon is Sir Arthur Folkes, former Governor General, former journalist, and a lot of other things in between. We're talking about, first of all, let me say this. I don't know how often these type of conversations happen. And again, I refer to the fact that we've probably spoken about this before. I've spoken with so many Bahamians who have seen a lot of time go by. People like C.W. Bethel, just a whole slew of them, right? And so, Arthur, we're losing the information.
Yes. There's
no repository of this. I get so. I tell this to Rogan all the time. I get so emotionally distraught when I watch just a simple show like Roadshow Antique, right, where they talk about the history of this item. And we don't seem to have that. Just the other day, I've been looking at my ancestry, which I hadn't really tracked. I'm not starting to get it now. It's sad. I don't know how we've gotten to that state and why we didn't pay attention to that.
Well, that brings me to one of my favorite peeves, and that is the way we have neglected our national monuments, our heritage.
Right.
I went some years ago. I went to Black Bears Tower.
Oh yeah.
And I was just amazed and disgusted to see how the condition that was in.
Yes.
That should have been. I understand it's on private property, but the government could work some.
They could have acquired it. Yes.
Or acquire it.
Yeah.
That should be restored because the building, the shell is really stone.
Yes. Yeah.
But the other stuff is. They rebuilt the Globe Theatre in London.
Sure, of course.
Just as it was in the days of Shakespeare, for God's sake. And there's so many. I have to thank Prime Minister Perry Christie and former Minister Danny Johnson. One time at St. Agnes Church, I mentioned the
thing on Long Wharf
on the Western Esplanade.
Yeah.
And that had been neglected for years. I used to write about it, talk about it. And there was an event at St. Agnes Church, and I mentioned, and Mr. Christie turned to Mr. Johnson and said, let's take care of that.
Right.
Yes.
And he spoke to the people at Antiquities.
Right, it's been done.
And the Ministry of Works, that they got it done. It's and the inscription is there. It's about, that is a story. That's a monument to the memory of some courageous Bahamians from over here.
I remember talking to Dan Courtney Strawn, who was in charge of the antiquities. And I hope I'm getting this right. I get so many stories I forget. And he was telling me how that there was an incident where at the graveyard on Augusta Street there, which I don't know if people even see this when they pass it. I really don't know if they see it. They just pass it and don't see it. That a bulldozer or something preparing for another grave was digging up Sir Gregory's grave. Now, okay, so we have this thing called Gregory Arch. And we don't even know why it's named Gregory Arch. Okay? But it was after a governor, so someone Gregory or something. That's...
You know what they do? You've been to London. On all the historical buildings, and you could spot it a mile off. It's a plaque,
Yes.
and it's in blue ceramic. So the minute you see that, you know that that's the site.
Right.
And they have that has been advocated for us a long time ago. It hasn't been done yet.
It's hard to do.
I hope it's done one of these days.
You know what? As the managing director of the Downtown Nassau Partnership, I can assure you by the time you come back again, that will be implemented.
Get a design.
It's a uniform thing, and you just put the story. It's always funding and priority, right?
Our history is given to us in letters in the book, and also monuments and celebrations and observances. Right?
But just going back to this thing with the graveyards, we have some graveyards here that if you were in a European place or even in America, but European who has, because our history goes back even further than, it goes back, 300 years? More. Okay, if you go back to the Columbus landing.
Yeah,
but I'm talking about, civilization, right? And you have graveyards that go back many, many, many years, and they tell a lot of a story of New Providence and Nassau. And they're not kept.
I know.
They're not respected. And these are the kind of things that, our children are. But Rogan and I were talking about, and I want to bring it to this: education. Now, when the Progressive Liberal Party took over in 1967, there was a focus. I think Sir Cecil was the first Minister of Education. Is that correct?
No, he was the second.
Second, okay.
AD was.
Okay,
Mr.
all right. But I know between the two of them, they instituted a program called the Common Entrance Exam. And people like myself were able to go to private schools. Now, I wonder if that was an error in the sense that they focused on getting me into a private school rather than putting resources into the public schools. I don't know. But the point is they focused on education, at least to some extent.
That's what was happening.
What happened after that?
What happened was we had to take intermediate steps because, the government came in and
I'm talking to someone who was there. Why am I trying to guess it?
That was one of the bad things about that era before '67. Education was not made available to a lot of people. Only a handful of people were able to sit an exam to go to government high school every year. Only a handful out of hundreds of.
Well, what would be the qualifying?
You had to sit an exam. And just the select few who passed that exam, and who had 10 shillings, I think it was, go to government high. The rest, you got to go find something to do. Now, so the government had this problem. I can understand why they did that because it takes some time to build schools.
The infrastructure, right?
We had at that time, I think, the Eastern Senior, Western Senior, which now C.R. Walker,
right?
And when was Southern Senior built? I don't remember.
The Columbus thing. What was that? That was Southern Senior. Or Columbus, where Columbus Primary is on Collins Avenue in Wolf Road?
That was before. I think Carl used to be headmaster there. Okay. But there was a shortage of schools, and the government had to do this massive program of building secondary schools for the Bahamians. So that took time.
Right. So what I thought was always there, like then Highbury High and AFI, they weren't there.
No.
You see? See, she thought they was always there.
You do.
Yeah, I did. But then something happened, Sir Arthur. And when you look at the most developed countries in the world, and we always go to Finland and these places, Korea, South Korea, they took every bit of energy they had and they sunk into education. And that paid dividends because those people came out of the schools, they were innovative, they were educated, they became teachers. They also celebrated teachers and made them the profession of preference, of respect, even more so than doctors and lawyers. What happened that took us from that direction?
It's very difficult to say. I know that when I was growing up, and obviously in your time as well, which was later, you're right. Teachers were held in the highest respect.
Oh yeah.
Along with the doctors and the lawyers and the others. But I don't know. I don't. Maybe we need to do a study to find out why that is so.
Yeah.
But all is not lost. You got to remember, and I keep pointing this out. Even though we have a lot of ground to cover, and our educational system, I know, needs a lot of redoing. Mm-hmm. If you look at it from my perspective, an old man who knew what it was like when I was a boy, as I just mentioned to you.
You mean with zero education?
Well,
virtually,
exactly. Right? I mentioned a handful going to government high school. Even fewer could go off to university of my generation. Elo went in 80. Cecil had work. And then later his father helped him to go. But just a handful. The rest of us, we had to go. I went to work at the Tribune to the Guardian at the age of 15.
Wow.
So that was the option.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, remember we had J.B. Farrington here, and he said what he had to do.
But this is the point. Even though we have so much to do and there's so much wrong, today we have thousands of Bahamians with degrees, with bachelors, with masters,
PhDs even.
PhDs, and we got a couple of Rhodes Scholars. So, criticize, but don't despair.
No, I'm not despair, but a lot of things also in perspective, right? So, in other words, back then, the demands, all right, look at you, look at J.B. Farrington, okay? The reality is, back then, when you went to work, when you moved through the society over a period of time, you were able to, with that limited educational background, able to move up. The challenge is now, of course, even people with masters are challenged to move up because of the demands, the criteria, the challenges that you have to meet in order to survive in this society, right? So it's all it's proportional to some extent.
It's a complex problem.
It's a complex problem.
And we have to educate. You can't tell people what to do.
Right.
I saw the Minister of Health the other day talking about the doctors. Apparently we are now at the point where we're getting too many doctors.
Too many doctors, yeah.
But you can't tell that you don't do medicine.
No.
But you got to find a way to encourage young people to do things, to study things that are applicable to our society, to our needs.
I think
in your area.
Well, you see what I don't know if you heard when I
heard what you said
about Vincent.
I heard what you said,
He was the only person in his graduating class that had to be in the early 70s to study hospitality, or to be in the hospitality industry. He didn't even study it. He he was in marketing, but he ended up in the hospitality industry. And it's our number one industry. And I'm telling you, and your son was involved in the industry. You know that right now there's a challenge. This is fact, to find good senior people to manage the kind of facilities that we have today. But that's absurd. That's a number. It would be like being in the United States, they build cars and they can't find anyone to be in charge of Ford.
But that's a part of the challenge, right? But we have to go into the schools. We have to talk to our young people, and this has been done to some extent. We have to have job fairs and get them motivated. I saw there was something the other day where these kids were somewhere and they were looking into various types of things they could do. I think you were mentioning the robot thing.
That's right.
See, that opens up a whole avenue that maybe those kids never even thought about.
Exactly. That's exactly what they said today.
After Nicolette Bethel was on the show on Monday. And after she left, we were talking about opportunities, etc., and we had a little dispute over it. And I said, why is it that especially given the globalization capacity. So in other words, Rogan Smith with her column, or Ken Williams with his acumen for technology, right, should be able to expose themselves where they're not just limited to this marketplace. But even more so, why are we not finding innovators? I watch Shark Tank.
Oh, my favorite show.
And I see a kid.
Yes.
A kid. Okay, they're in college.
12-year-olds, 14-year-olds.
Okay, and they're thinking like, I'm inventing this product or I'm doing this product, and now they're like millionaires because they're thinking entrepreneurially first of all, but not just on making boxes. They're thinking on what can I make that will be innovative.
Right.
Why? What? And you would have seen this process over time. Where is our innovation? Because I'm sorry to say, I don't know if I recognize it. I don't know if it's out there in a range of in a wide in a volume. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anyone, but I just don't see it.
Does it have to be technological innovation?
No, it can be
or
anything. Anything. I mean, I know we are good at copying things, and we got the fishing industry and fine, but innovation. Where are we with that, Sir Arthur? And why hasn't it happened?
Well, it's the same answer. You have to expose young people to it. You have to open up these possibilities to them. They have to see that. I don't know how many of them watched. I don't watch it myself, but I've heard about it.
Right.
Because I think Nikki Kelly mentioned the shark thing. But that is what you do. You have to expose people to it.
And do we need to then revamp how we think about education? When I was growing up, GC, lawyer, doctor,
yes,
accountant.
Yes.
That's what's
ingrained
in kids, though, and they want to veer from that, But a lot of times the parents or society says these are the categories.
Otherwise,
these are the
you're
respected.
nothing.
Yes,
you have no
exactly.
value.
I just had this conversation today with a coworker.
Yeah, they see that as prestige.
That's the exact word that was said
One of my
today.
best friends was the first one to have a business out of high school. He was not academically inclined. He was good with woodwork, and he opened up a frame center. And it was one of the first people in my class, in my era, to have a business. I suppose they're trying it with BTVI, et cetera, but at the high school level, people should be more. But we've taken away those programs like woodwork and metalwork.
I'm told that the kind of welding that they do at a ship repair in Freeport, that's a specialty.
World class.
And I understand that the people who master that, they are doing very well.
Yes.
Better than some other professionals.
When I went to Grand Mama. That's correct.
So these are the kind of examples you have to show. You have to show the young people.
So I'm
convinced we have the native talent.
Oh yeah,
talent is there.
Oh yeah. So we have to then, and I don't know how innovative we've been in our educational development in terms of what the program, the curriculum is. In terms of just, there's some people, they just don't even have classes. You go to school and you just learn how to there's just so much out there now than just the structured, learn history, geography, biology, chemistry, math, English. And then when you come out, if you're not an accountant and if not a doctor, well, we don't care what happens to you. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Sir Arthur, folks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're in our last segment here with our, we say this and maybe we shouldn't say it in this instance, but maybe we'll have to add an extraordinarily or an extraordinary in front of the name, our extraordinary special guest, Sir Arthur, folks.
That'd be very appropriate.
Let me just say this, and I'm sure Sir Arthur will be embarrassed by this, but there are treasures. You don't want to diminish this because before you know it, everyone is in the treasure category. But there are treasures, and Sir Arthur, I can tell you are truly one of them because of your wealth of knowledge, your history, your contribution.
His selflessness.
To this community.
It's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. I wouldn't say that about Rogan Smith. So she'll say it's unkind.
She's just starting.
Yeah, she's aspiring to be a treasure. Okay, she's a treasure aspirant. So but of course she's an icon. I don't know if you know that she won the Icon Award.
Don't listen.
Where do we, Sir Arthur? You've had the luxury of being there in the past, of seeing the transition. I think at least 2 to 3 transitions in reality, right? You saw a transition from minority rule to majority rule, the transition from being a colony to independence,
right.
seeing the
Lived
transition
this.
from the PLP's internal issues, and then the split off, and the FNM coming to be, and then many years that you fought in the trenches with the FNM. I mean, I used to always look at you and say, boy, I remember you fought, you had some hard years there in opposition.
Twice.
Talk about that. Talk about that.
Well, I hesitate to talk about partisan. I like to talk about things broadly.
Right.
But those were things that there were things that a real patriot is called upon to do for his country,
Right.
and it isn't a question about whether or not you had to do it. There are certain things that
And that has
had
happened
to
with
be
you
done,
on several
and
occasions, because you had to be that way prior to majority rule.
And
So you kept the same theme.
And there were plenty of us, and there were some people, those of us who were on the front line. Don't forget, for each one of us, there were many more who sacrificed and did a lot of things, and we don't even know their names.
Don't even know their names.
So they also served, right?
So you went through that process, 25 years in opposition in the first instance, correct? Is that correct? And then, of course, and we kind of had this acceleration of opposition, change of governments. So you've been through all of that. We are where we are now. Looking back, and I'm going to try to put this in as wise a framework as I can. Looking back on which you had aspired to see the Bahamas be when you were in your 20s, say, to what the Bahamas is now, and what you would like to see it become. How would you frame that?
That's very difficult. There were some aspects of I was just using that quote, what happens to a dream deferred. There were some tragedies along the way, some things that should have been done, unfortunately that were not done, and I grieve about that all the time. And sometimes I look and I say, now if we had only done that.
Could you give us?
I give you a perfect example is Edmund Knox's Jumbay Village.
Right.
Imagine in the heart of Over the Hill, a cultural village representing every aspect of Bahamian culture.
Right.
The straw waker, the artists, the theater, the restaurants, the food, the whole thing.
By the way, for people who don't have a reference, it goes from like where BEC is all the way down to like past National Insurance Building, right? Yeah.
The theater was actually built.
I know, I was there. I remember.
Just imagine the economic impact, apart from the cultural impact, the cultural and economic impact that would have had on what we're talking about now, Over the Hill, which has been so neglected. That is what is tragic.
Because it's one thing to just say we're going to try to improve it economically. You have to have the catalyst.
Yeah. But if you had that, you see what a catalyst that would have been for young people
to express themselves.
And a symbol of great pride for the nation.
Right.
That was, I weep over that a lot of times. I tell you, that was a great tragedy. Right. So, but we've accomplished a lot. But unfortunately, and I suppose this is a story of nations. Some things we just don't get done. We make mistakes. We're humans, I guess, and that is the way history is.
But if you look at leadership, and this is constant question. So we're tired of hearing it. We look at people like the Singapore example. This is an example that we'll always hear about in our lifetime. It really has to do at the end of the day, Sir Arthur, with the visionaire, with the leadership. I use Saul Kurz as an example. We've had many and many an investor in this country. Okay. And I'm not saying this simply because I knew and worked with the man, but we've had many investor. In fact, Sean Connery said at the reception for Sir Saul when he became a knight, and he said it very candidly. He says, "There's been many a person who's come through these shores, but no one has delivered like Saul Kurz." At the end of the day, it comes down to leadership. Did we not have the type of leadership to take us to where we could have avoided some of these things, where we could have seen the value in a Jumbay village, or we just fallible men and women?
We allowed a lot of things to intervene. I don't want to...
Politics?
Politics and tribalism.
Right.
And pettiness
Yeah.
to intervene and threw us off course, and that's very unfortunate.
Right. It takes a strong. Go ahead, Rogan. I know you.
No, I want to take you off course.
Uh-huh.
I don't
That's
know if you
fine.
want to
That's
finish.
fine. That's fine.
No, I was going to say, and I wished you were here for our Independence Day show. I wanted to know, what hopes and dreams did you have for the Bahamas after independence? Where did you think the Bahamas would be into that? I mean, even if you didn't say 2018, today, when you were seeing that Union Jack being lowered and our flag going up, I would imagine that you start thinking about what your country could be, where it could be years from now. And has it lived up to your expectations?
Not, as I said, not fully. To answer that question in full, I would have to write you a book.
Wow.
Because some of us, I think we talked about this before, there was a group of us, young men, in the PLP, and you know some of them, Jeff Thompson, Warren Rafferty, Clement Maynard, Dr. Eugene Newry, some of us. Mm-hmm. We used to meet together, and we talked incessantly.
How old were you then?
Some in our 20s, some in our 30s.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to talk about these things. We used to envision. We even talked about how it is important now, say in Andros, to start thinking about where the road of the future is going to be. Mm-hmm. So you don't let nobody build there now. Where the dock is going to be, where the airport is going to be. We talked about details like that. In addition to the philosophy, the politics, and we talked about all of that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a lack of imagination. Au contraire. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Imaginative, and we are, as you know, we're an imaginative people.
Absolutely.
The Bahamians are the most talented people in the world. I use this example. There was the old people used to say, you know better, so when you do wrong, you're fit enough. You know what I'm talking about?
That's too local for me to understand. I can run that by myself.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is we are some of the most talented people in the world when you consider how small we are.
That's right.
Population.
When I was
people with all kind of talent. Mm-hmm. But so when we do foolishness, we have only ourselves to blame.
That's right.
That's the point.
When I was in college studying political science, and I obviously was studying mostly U.S. and European models, one of the things that always occurred to me, and I'm going to make this comparison very lightly and take it to what I mean. I would look at the development of the United States, and I thought to myself, the Bahamas could be just like this. And I don't mean that we could be the United States. I meant that because we had different islands, because of our archipelagic structure and thing, that we should be pioneering. Okay, that we should be encouraged. When the United States was building up, they encouraged people to go to Oklahoma and claim land and build it. And I think that, do you think, and you were involved in the whole process, that this adherence, not to the Westminster system I don't have a problem with, but the single layered system that we have, that we didn't allow islands, for instance, to develop, thereby putting more and more pressure on the central government, right, to subsidize them. That we didn't allow people like in Inagua, where I know your heartstring comes from. That we didn't allow the naval string. We didn't allow those islands to blossom on their own, right? We didn't allow the Andros to blossom. Do you think that was an error?
I don't think, when you say allow, I wouldn't put it quite like that. We didn't sufficiently promote the development of those islands. Mind you, we've had some successes. Eleuthera, Abaco, Exuma is coming on nicely.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the islands are still, the old people used to say, behind God back, meaning they're undeveloped.
Right.
But we have generations of development to do.
Right.
And this archipelago of ours, somebody called it an archipelago of opportunities.
Right.
There's so many things that we can do. I envy future generations.
But do you think that those people who would have had who have dreams, in the same that we had a dream for the nation, that the people have those dreams on each of those islands, that they're being somehow stunted or thwarted because there's so much reliance on central government approvals, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't think it is so much the reliance on approval. I think it is just the difficulty.
Yeah.
it's not easy. I was born on Rhode Island. I was born on Inagua.
Right.
And
But Inagua succeeded to some extent because of Morton Salt, right?
because of the salt business.
Right.
Yeah.
It
If it weren't for that, Inagua would have been a really backward.
Right. Now, do you think that Inagua could have gone further?
I think even now,
Yeah.
Inagua is a wildlife sanctuary.
Yes,
Right.
it is.
Uh-huh.
And there are people in this world who would fly miles and miles once they have accommodation just to get a glimpse of a particular bird.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have the flamingo. We have in Inagua we have a hummingbird that is found only in Inagua and nowhere else in the world.
So, Arthur,
We have
you go to Africa.
we have the roseate spoonbill
Right,
duck. He's a
right,
duck.
right,
His pink is even more beautiful. He's not as big as a flamingo.
Right.
But which comes first, chicken or the egg?
I mean, you have
to
places in Africa in the middle of nowhere, right, where people build lodges, etc. Only 20 rooms. But them rooms cost, they don't cost no $200 a night or no 99. Okay, if you want to come and look at the spoon-billed pink, whatever that is you call it, you're going to spend $400 or $500. But the people who want to see that want to spend that. They'll spend that.
They will spend
So what has prevented that from happening?
Well, as I said, chicken and egg. Do I build a building? Do I build a hotel
So then they will come.
before the air service is there?
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or do I do the air service?
Right.
And there's no.
And no building.
So you gotta.
So we gotta get it
we
together.
gotta-
Yeah.
But there are people who come to Inagua, small numbers, but they come. They've been there repeatedly.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They,
Yeah.
to
And I like
experience
Inagua.
this. Mhm.
To get the best kept secret. Well, I don't know when you were growing up in Inagua. When did you leave Inagua?
In 1938,
Okay, and you were how old then?
I was 10.
I marvel at people who were born, because all of us almost
37, 39, I think, yeah.
almost everyone was born in Rhode Island, right? I mean, there's a big chunk of people who were not born in New Providence, and I try to imagine being born back in 1938. I mean, I'm not trying to be offensive. Had to seem desolate or remote, and then just like, how did I get here? Once you moved to New Providence, how was that? Talk about transitions, right? How did that? What was that transition like?
For a young boy like me, it was quite a thing to be in quote the city.
Yeah. Island, boy, the city to the city.
But don't forget that Inagua, fortunately, Inagua had a very interesting history. Inagua had periods of tremendous prosperity. And when I was a boy, we were just coming out of one of those periods. If you see the Matthewtown is laid out in city
Like
blocks.
estates, yeah.
Yes.
There was
what I
tremendous
like about
prosperity.
it.
My
Right.
granduncle Arthur Simonet used to represent the steamships.
Uh-huh.
The boats came from Germany, France,
This is
all
because
over
of
the
the Panama
world.
Canal thing, right?
They recruited for the Panama Canal, and they picked up stevedores, I guess you call them,
Uh-huh.
to work on the ships, who went from Inagua to South America up to as far as the maritime provinces,
Right.
Canada. Never saw Nassau.
People don't realize how, and correct me if I'm wrong,
So it is
how the Panama
sophisticated
Canal
society.
impacted the Bahamas
Yeah.
because of the shipping lanes.
And the southern islands then, and not only Inagua, Acklands, Crooked Island,
Long Key.
Long Key. Do you know that Long Key has about, I don't think there are 20 people living on Long Key now. But do you know that back in the day, Long Key had a population not of several hundred, but of several thousand?
Yeah, I think it was
Long
like
Key?
10,000. Has the oldest church, correct?
And if you see the church,
Yeah,
the ruins of the church, you could see that this was a prosperous society.
right.
And the gravestones in Long Key,
Yeah.
with marble gravestones.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Because that was a
It's
shipping
prosperous.
lane.
Exactly.
So everything happened.
We didn't deal with Nassau back then. We traded with Europe, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Turks and Caicos. And people came from all over the world. Inagua was really cosmopolitan. I remember when I was growing up, I used to sing Spanish songs. Cuidado con el perro. I didn't know what it meant.
And you would have had a diverse population.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I believe that when I can't count for before because I understand it was a settlement at Northwest Point. In Inagua now there's only one settlement, and that's the way it was when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
There was a settlement in Northwest Point, and there was another small settlement somewhere. But all of us lived in Matthew Town. And the interesting thing is that I believe this was the only island in the Bahamas where there was a considerable white population that was not segregated. And that's because of the cosmopolitan nature of Inagua.
Yeah.
It didn't have a plantation background.
Right.
Didn't have that
It was more
loyalist
industrial
thing.
and shipping.
People came from all about, from Germany, from France, from Bermuda to do the salt thing, from all over.
Right.
And whites and blacks went to the same church, belonged to the same lodges,
Yes.
Right.
buried in the same graveyard. And so that was a bit of a shock to me when I
Very
came to Nassau.
Right. And again, you know,
and intermarried, which is the acid test. Eh?
and again, except for this moment, I don't know if Rogan Smith, Ed Fields, or Kendrick Williams knew all of that. And that's why we're so happy to have you, because this is the kind of information. And I know, you know, a lot of people tell us how much they listen to the show, and I know that right now as we speak, and there are people, probably descendants from Inagua, out
nodding
there,
their
who
heads
are
as they
just
listen.
sitting and saying, "Boy, that was it. That is what I want to learn about this country. That's how I want to track my belongedness to this country." And I want to thank you, Sir Arthur,
Thank you so much, Sir.
for giving us
My
that
great
privilege.
pleasure.
We'll see you again, folks, on Monday. Well, no, it's
Holiday.
Emancipation Day.
Hey.
You know, read about it.
Thursday.
You know, or call Sir Arthur. He'll tell you more about it.
Next week, Thursday.
Thank you.